Omens of Ice. Omens of Ice is a new expansion for the Elder Sign game. A dice game inspired by Arkham Horror. It has the same theme, but it's much smaller when it comes to the box. It is much shorter and easier to play. Basically, for when you want to have an Arkham Horror experience, but you do not have the time, but you still want to face the risk of being devoured by nameless, unspeakable horrors that your mind cannot even begin to conceptualize. So, other game, really intensely thematic game that is very playable and very approachable. Omens of Ice adds to the original game by giving you new adventure cards and new elements that allow you to play in a different setting. This version of the game is set in Alaska. The investigators moved up there because there are news, there are rumors that one of the elders is going to awaken and do the usual bad stuff that these big monsters do. And so the investigators are trying to collect clues and to prevent that from happening. Let me show you how the expansion works. The game shares the same basic ideas and philosophy of the original game. Each player will control a character whose stats are indicated on this card. You will use tokens to keep track of the fluctuating values of sanity and stamina the character has. The card also tells you about the starting items and the special skill that the character has. And you have a good bunch of new characters here. A lot of new people that you can control and play with different abilities and skills. Pretty neat. Each card also is represented by a matching token that goes on one of the cards in the game to represent the position of the character. You can move the character to another card at the beginning of your turn, and in many cases the character will go to one of these big cards here, which are the adventure cards. When you put the character on an adventure card, there may be an entry effect that you need to resolve when the character moves to the card. That's the first thing that you do. If the card is face up, we'll talk about that in a minute, you resolve the effects and follow the text instructions, and then you will try to accomplish the mission on that adventure by rolling dice and matching the symbols here. When you have the matching symbols, you put them on the corresponding boxes, then you re-roll the remaining dice and you try to match the symbols of the following lines. You have to resolve the lines one at a time. If you manage to do so, you gain the advantage that is indicated here at the bottom of the card, indicated by these symbols. If you fail, then you have to suffer the penalties indicated by these symbols. Sometimes there's a slash there, which means you choose which side you want to use, if you want to use these rewards or these rewards here. So once you are done, you may go, if you succeed, then the card is discarded, you replace it, and you go to the expedition camp. There may also be monsters. These are the monsters that come with this expansion. So again, we have a pretty decent pool of monsters, a lot of wild animals and yetis and things like that, as it is fitting considering the theme. And just to give you a sense, the big scary bear, wolf packs. There is a bunch of wolf packs. Some monsters also have the symbol here, which means that the monster has an effect that applies at midnight, and it is printed on the back. So you may want to eliminate the monster before midnight comes. And there are game effects that will add monsters to the cards, and then the monster simply becomes another line that you have to fulfill to be able to win the card. When you win the card, when you complete the adventure, you take the card, and the card is worth that number of trophies that you can then spend when you are in the expedition camp. The expedition camp is an area that allows you to spend trophies that you have acquired earlier and to gain corresponding advantages, such as gaining items, regaining stamina and sanity, things like that. Once you're done with your turn, also you advance the time using this clock here. The arm of the clock only moves by increments of 3 hours at a time. So that means that every fourth turn, unless there's a game effect that stops the clock or a game effect that speeds up the clock, unless there are such effects. Every four turns, it will be midnight, and at midnight you resolve all the at midnight effects that are visible on the board. Cards may have at midnight effects, monsters may give at midnight effects. You simply resolve those following the text. Now, another thing about midnight is that at midnight you draw a Mythos card. This expansion comes with its own set of Mythos cards, completely new cards, and each card offers two possible challenges, penalties that you have to face. So that's interesting because the card doesn't simply impose an effect on you, but gives you a choice, very often a tough one, so it makes facing the Mythos card more interesting. So you simply draw the card and resolve the effect that you have decided on between the two that are available. Most of the things that I mentioned are things that you have in both sets, the base set and this here, the common things, but now I want to tell about some things that are more specific to Omens of Ice and you do not have in the base set. One is that both sides of the adventure cards are game active, they have game effect. Usually when you resolve a card and you need to replace it, you take it from the deck of adventure cards and you put it face down. Let's just say with the landscape side face up and the adventure side face down. These cards have an effect that may be an at midnight effect, so it simply applies if the card is still this side face up when midnight comes, or it may have another effect that is activated when the card moves to that card. Then you move to the card, you resolve the action, then you turn it, and then you resolve it normally, possibly resolving an entry effect. There are also terror effects that apply when you fail to solve a card, and there is a die that is showing a terror symbol. But the new thing compared to the base set is this idea that the cards have two sides and even the back has a game effect. As you can see also the cards are color coded, the colors are yellow, green and red in ascending order of difficulty, so you do not know exactly the challenge that you have on the other side, but you get a sense of how tough the challenge is going to be. Another thing, at the beginning of the game there is this special card on the table. It's always there in all games. It has an at midnight effect. It is resolved normally. If you fail to resolve it, you lose 2 hours on the clock. If you succeed, you discard it. Well, you take it as a trophy, and then you put the Into the Wild special adventure into play. As you can see from this number here, which is of a different color, this card belongs to a set of special adventure cards that are used to create a narrative in the game, to punctuate the narrative. So the first card indicates the time when the players have just arrived in the main area of the game and they're still moving around town before they really leave for the wilds. This card that follows that one represents as they are traveling far from civilization, as they're going into the wild. Again, it has an at midnight effect. Again, it is resolved normally. It has its own penalty, but if you succeed, you progress to stage 2. And then you have this other card here, which you put there, which represents stage 2. And again, it's the card that, when resolved, will allow you to get to the final adventure card. But when you reach stage 2, putting this card into play is not the only thing that happens. You also remove this deck of adventure cards and you replace it with another deck, which is, well, the deck of Adventure 2 cards, which are tougher, which are harder, and represent the best stuff that happens to you when you are away from civilization. So actually deciding when to move from the earliest stage when you have easier challenges, and that stage represents when you are again facing minor challenges and collecting resources, and then you have to choose when to move into the harder part of the adventure, but they can also be more profitable in terms of what you find and gathering other sites. That's a major decision, because a decision you cannot go back from. When you're assigned to move to level 2, things get tough. So if you do it too early, it's bad, but if you do it too late, then it's also bad, because then you may not have time to collect enough Elder Signs to win the game. Time is an important element here also because of this other card here, because the area in which you're traveling is plagued by unnatural storms, and there's a clock that is ticking against you, and the weather gets worse and worse because the forces of evil are sending storms on the land. So this card keeps track of two things. One is time. Every time the midnight comes, you move to a next day, and you move this other token here on this track, and you add the corresponding number of storm tokens to the cards that are on the table. So in day 2, you add 2 tokens, then 4, 5, 6, and so on. Tokens, the storm tokens are these tokens here. You may want to put them in a opaque cup like I did to randomize them. You draw the number of tokens that you need to add, and then you simply add them face down to cards on the board. When a character moves to that card, then you reveal it to the other side, and you simply resolve the effect represented by the symbol, which is usually a penalty. Some of these are blank, but in most cases there are penalties, such as a monster appears, you lose stuff, so on and so forth. There are game effects that allow you to remove them, so you do not have to face those penalties when you move to the card that has them. For example, the Expedition Camp allows you to remove up to 5 storm markers, but the storms will keep coming. They'll pile up. You cannot have more than 4 on each. They are an important element of the game. Where you place them in areas that maybe you do not need to enter immediately, and you're putting them there, gathering them in the hope that you'll be able to remove them before you have to enter that area. That's an important part of the game. The other element that is tracked on this other card here is supplies. You have a marker that you move here to represent the number of supplies. If you're over 10, use this other marker here. If you go over 20, well, good for you. And use this other marker here. In this case, for example, at 24 supplies. There are a lot of effects that will simply consume your supplies, and you always want to have some, because if investigators have 0 supplies at midnight, they all lose 1 stamina, which feels very thematic, very appropriate, and it's also very well ingrained in the mechanics of the game, because there are a lot of game effects that challenge you and force you to lose supplies. Very often you have a tough choice. You want to get that benefit, yes, but it costs a certain amount of supplies. So there are decisions there. You're constantly spending supplies. They're a way of replenishing supplies, but the downside is that, of course, then you're spending time to replenish supplies. So that's another element that doesn't feel trivial at all. It's not just another moving token on a board, but it is an element that brings a lot of interest, decisions, and theme to the game. You go on like this, collecting resources, trying to survive, and very important, try to find ways from the symbols at the bottom of the cards and from the game effects to collect elder tokens that you need to defeat the big bad guy that you are facing. This set comes with 3 baddies, Itaqua being the worst and toughest of all of them. And their game effects that, of course, like in the traditional game, will force you to put tokens on this track here. When the track is full, the monster breaks into our reality and you have to face the monster, and usually the monster kills you then. So you're trying to collect elder signs, a sufficient number of elder signs to stop the monster from coming. If you're able to prevent the arrival of the monster or defeat the monster once the monster appears, you win the game. If the monster does enter our reality and kills the investigators, then the monster wins and the group, the team, the players lose. I like Omens of Ice a lot. There's one small detail that I need to mention though. If you do not own any of the other expansions, if you only have this expansion and the original game, you will find some symbols in Omens of Ice in the reward and penalty sections of the cards that you will not recognize, that are not mentioned or acknowledged anywhere in the rulebook of this expansion or the original game. Why so? Because they refer to things that happen, to effects that apply to other expansions, and that also require components that if you only have Omens of Ice and the original game, you do not have. So maybe it would have been less confusing if the rulebook in here had acknowledged that and explained. Don't worry, because the point is really you do not need to worry. When there are those elements that always is in sections where you have a choice, you can choose the reward or penalty that has an effect that you can only implement if you have the other expansions, or you can choose reward or penalty that you can implement by using the base game and Omens of Ice only. So just a little thing that may be confusing for some players, but it's not a big deal because you can totally play the game just with this expansion and the base game. And this expansion really makes the game very different from how the game was originally. The fact that the cards have effects and challenges on both sides. Some cards may be beneficial just because of the effect on the back of the card. That means you may want to go there when it's the right time. For example, you want to lose maybe some stamina. Wait until you have lost some stamina before you go and get the card that allows you to recover stamina, but there may be other considerations that play into your decision. There may be a midnight effect, so you may be drawn towards certain cards that you want to flip face up before midnight comes. But maybe those are cards that when you reveal them, you regret. You thought, man, maybe facing the midnight effect would have been better. But to me, what really changes the game and makes it very different from the original is the narrative, is the multi-act structure that you have here, with a section happening around the base camp, the initial camp, or the small town, where it's easy or easier to gather resources, where you face monsters and challenges that are not too tough. We're building up strength before you start the where you have an intermediate part into the wild, and then before you start the toughest part of the adventure with a completely different set of adventure cards. Since each deck, the first stage and second stage are shuffled individually, you still have a lot of variety there, but you do have this arc, you do have this progression, and I like that. I am a fan of fiction, I'm a fan of narrative. I'm not a narratologist in the sense that I believe all games have a narrative or must have a narrative, but I like the games that do have one, and some games do, and this one, Omens of Ice, has more of a narrative feel than the original game, precisely because things happen in an order of progression that seems to make sense. That seems to have a direction that, however, doesn't feel dull or repetitive because there's a lot of variety within each act. To me, that's a big thing, and I like just not the fact that it gives me the sense that there's more of a story here, of a journey during which you face all sorts of horrible things, but it also does so just not by pasting some narrative element onto the game, but by turning the narrative elements into a mechanic of the game, into a challenge of the game, into a decision that is important in game terms, which is the timing of switching from one act to the other. Because frankly, passing the adventure, the challenge that gets you from the initial stage into the wild, and then from the wild, from the journey to the main area, to the Treasure's Ascent, and then the Heart of Darkness, those challenges are not super tough, especially the early ones. That means it's really a matter of deciding when it is that you want to move on. And those cards also are good in terms of trophies. But if you're just hunting for those trophies and those challenges that are not too tough, and then you find yourself stuck in very treacherous areas before you're ready, then of course that was a bad decision. So I really like how the division in acts in this game, in the adventure decks, gives you more of a narrative feel, of a sort of thematic punctuation that builds up into a story, and at the same time it adds an extra challenge to the game. The storm markers, they felt a little fiddly at the beginning, but I didn't have any problem after once or twice I was just adding them. I saw that they also add to the theme. They look a little cartoonish because of the art, but if you start imagining, if you add a little bit of word there, and you start imagining indeed these scary and natural uncanny clouds, it's not just getting dark, it's not cloudy, it's those Lovecraftian clouds that don't look like they come out of natural processes, then they also add to the atmosphere. And again, they add a lot to the challenge, because placing them is a challenge. You do not want them to concentrate too much in treacherous areas, so placing them is a challenge. Choosing when to trigger effects that may add triggering effects that may delay them, that's another element, that's another aspect of the game. choosing when to go and face them, it's another element, and then choosing when to spend trophies, and maybe you want to spend for something else to remove some of those storm markers, that's another element. There is the simple addition actually adds a lot of layers. I would say adds an entire micro branch of this micro branching trees of decisions concerning that area only, without making the game feel more fiddly, which was my fear at the beginning, and my fear was completely unjustified. So I think that this game really adds a lot to the base game. I personally enjoy it very much. I like pretty much anything in it. I like the new characters, I like the new effects, the new allies, etc., etc. But what I like, again, more than anything, is the new setting, and the sense of a stronger narrative that you have here, while the game also remains a very approachable, very easy dice game. So Omens of Ice, definitely a good expansion. I'm glad I played it, and I recommend it to pretty much anybody who has enjoyed Elder Signs in the past. I think if you enjoyed the basic Elder Sign, you will enjoy this one.
I am the Dark Lord Cthulhu, and I approve this review.